right, we're good to go.
Terrific. Do I sound okay on that end?
You sound good, Elisa. This is Sarah. You've got a room full of attentive people now. I think we're ready to kick it off.
That's awesome. Thank you all. And thank you, Tess, for making this possible for me to call in. I really appreciate the hoops you jumped through to get this all together. But hey, everyone,
Hey.
all of you are well. I wish I could see all your beautiful faces. But in lieu of that, I will just listen to your marvelous voices. And so, welcome to the Charter School Subcommittee meeting. Thrilled to have a couple of special guests, Dr. Megan Quayle, Randy Dowell. Good to have you here with us. Super excited to hear from you directly about progress against spamming in schools. And of course, everyone on staff, Tess, Jay, Angie, Sarah, thank you so much for doing all the work required to put this together, and the prep and all of it is just super helpful, particularly to get it in advance so that we could review and ask questions beforehand and just make sure we're on the same page. So yes, thank you. So I think the agenda today, I feel, is pretty straightforward. First of all, excited to dive in with you, Megan and Randy, just to hear more about what's been going on in your worlds. As a newly hatched LEA, we want to learn and apply lessons for other work, including our roles as, board members generally, overseeing a huge system. And so, yes, we're super psyched to hear from you. And then we'll jump from there into a discussion on the draft of the state board rule on the authorizer fee. And then finally end with the charter authorization planning for the 18-19 school year. So with that said, unless anyone objects, we should just go ahead and jump in and hear from Megan and Randy.
Great.
And I'll assume Sarah. Yeah, I think Sarah, Tess, one of you are going to be, since I.
Yep, I'm going to be your proxy here. This is Sarah.
Great. Thank you.
Tess is loading slides, and I think you have these, right, Elisa, so you can kind of follow along.
Yes.
Okay.
Yes.
When you're moving to a slide, so Elisa
Gotcha.
can know where to go.
Hello. This feels very formal. Can you
I
hear
know.
me?
This is actually more of a formal setting than we probably intended. Like I said, due to our sort of conflicting schedules and space availability, here we are.
Oh, thank you. Well, thanks for taking the opportunity to talk to me. And I apologize, I have a cold, so I sound horrible and may start coughing in the middle of this. So, see, there we go. Forgive me. I took a red eye in last night from Seattle, so I'm feeling a little loopy right now, but wanted to give you a quick update on how our first year with Bluff City is going. And if you want to just head over to slide 3, that is our mission statement. I know you all reviewed our appeal application last year, so you're all familiar with this, but we always like to start with a reminder that our the mission of Green Dot Public Schools is to help transform public education so all students graduate prepared for college leadership and life. And by all, we mean all, and we'll share some comparison data of the students that we serve. Also, just as a quick context, we are an organization right now of 30 schools. We will be opening 2 more, not in Tennessee, 1 more in Seattle and 1 more in California next year. But we have 5 schools here in Memphis, and 4 of them are turnaround schools, and then we have the one, Bluff City, that's just 3/4 of the way through its freshman year. Just to give you a little profile overview of this school, we have about 154 students, a 25% special education population, 16% ELL. And if you recall, part of our interest in opening this school in the first place was so we would have a good option for our students who are graduating from 2 of our middle schools, Wooddale Middle and Kirby. So you'll see we have a few more Kirby students than Wooddale. Kirby is right across the street from this new building, so that's kind of logical. We do have a couple of students that are coming from other charters as well. A couple of things of note in here is the special ed population is 25%, which is significantly over the Shelby County Schools average, which is about 12.3. The 2 high schools as well, where these students would have gone, their local schools, Wooddale High and Kirby, are about 17 to 18% special ed, so we do have a significant population of students who get special education services. And I think part of that I've seen in my experience in charter schools is parents know that charters can be safe small learning environments. So special ed parents are often great advocates in getting the applications in for their students. For this year, as we apply, we have gotten our applications in. We're in the process of having students accept their enrollments. But through the lottery this year, for our second year, we have 52% of students coming from Kirby and 46 from Wooddale Middle. So it's a pretty similar kind of population. Nothing much has changed there this year. And also feel free to stop and ask me questions if any of this doesn't make sense. What we try to do, since we don't have any full year data yet, is take a look at academic growth. We did assessments. We assess all students at the beginning of the school year in August. We assess them then in the end of first semester, and we'll assess them at the end of second semester as well. And what we have tried to do, we use a program called iReady for high schools, which is it's a English and a math test that sort of gives us, it is not the same as the state test, so it would not necessarily test the same standards, but it gives us an academic level of where our students are coming from. What we have been able to do in working with our own knowledge management team, our academic team, and instruction partners is sort of tier the students into groups. This would be similar to what we're looking at with a TVOS score, so that's why we did this. What we want to be able to see is, are our students growing from one tier to the next tier? So if you look at the bottom of slide 6, you'll see for our 9th grade, students who are in tier 1 are at or above grade level for 9th grade. Tier 2 would be students who are at 8th grade level, so somewhere within about a year of academic performance and where they start. And then tier 3 is a huge bucket of students who fall anywhere below 8th grade. And if we look at our high school overall, I have on slide 7, just a dip. If you can look at the red section, I think the thing of note here is when we took this, the students took the test this summer, 85.5% of our students were falling into tier 3 for English and 85.6% into tier 3 for math, which means most of these students were more than 2 grade levels below. And what you see if you look at this data, it's a little bit hard to understand sometimes, but what we have been able to do by the second test administration in December was move 17.1% of our students out of that first tier, and we've been able to move 8.9% of our students in reading into the top tier at grade level. So we are showing positive movement. You'll see the same for math, a little less extreme for math, but we're also showing positive gains in math as well, in moving them up grade levels and into different tiers. Any questions? Yes, Jay.
So, and we spoke about this at the site visit, but can you talk a little bit about, so that tier 3 group, that's really like K to 7,
Yes.
What sort of movement are you seeing from those lower end students who are not really close to that tier 2 level yet, but still, how does the growth look at that lower level?
They're showing strong growth, but I think the thing that all of our students are showing actually positive growth. I think one of the reasons we put it in this format instead of just looking at raw growth of any student is when we're tested on the state assessment, our TVOS score will demonstrate only students that move up a bucket. So for example, if we have a student who comes in reading at the 3rd grade level, we grow them to 5th grade level by the end of the year, they're still going to be a TVOS 1 student because of the way the test measures them. So we are seeing strong growth for the many students who are coming in below. And I think if you look at slide 7, when we're looking at the special ed population, you'll see that the growth in English is actually, or excuse me, reading is actually really strong. Or excuse me, is a little bit less. So we're seeing 20% of our non-special ed students move and 6.2 of our special ed students move out of tier 3. Part of this has to do with those tend to be, our special education students tend to be many, many grade levels below. So they're not just 2 grade levels below moving up 1, they're coming in reading at the K2 level or the 3rd grade level. So it's going to be a lot harder to grow those students. Generally speaking. And again, the format for this has to do with looking at TVOS because we will be held to that standard at the end of the year.
So 2 questions sort of related to that. How many of your tier 3 students, if you know, are 2 grade levels behind versus more than 2?
I don't have that on me, but we were actually surprised. There were quite a bit that were in the K2 level. I think about 20% of our students entered the school in the K2 level. And those tend to be, this is what happens when you have a special ed population as high as ours, is we'll get some very high need students in that level. I think it was 20% at K2, but I don't have the rest of the grade levels on me, but I can certainly send that your way.
And then the second part is, we talked a little bit about this again at the site visit, but and many of these students, as you pointed out, are coming from schools that you also serve
Yes.
in terms of the middle school. So they're you have experience now in Shelby County
Yeah.
in this transformational work. But what were your growth expectations for these students? So how are we doing as a school, in this growth trajectory, but based on sort of what our expectations have been for the
I think
year?
we're doing pretty well based on what we expected coming in. I think the difficult piece is the test itself doesn't necessarily measure as specifically the multiple grade levels of growth that you need. So we feel like we're doing really well. And you recall Kirby students that we had Kirby for 1 year, so we only had those students for 8th grade. And, there's some transiency in those things. In Wooddale, we had for 2 years. Most of those students are coming in to our 6th grade reading below the 3rd grade level. So we are in a large catch-up mode when we have to address our students. And I would suspect, although I don't have all of the charter school data, but I know based on comparing our independence in our other cities to our turnarounds, you're probably going to see our students coming in at Bluff are a little bit lower for the first year or so, but we are showing amazing growth at Kirby and Wooddale. So the longer we have them, I think the higher the Bluff City students are going to be coming in future years. But we were very early in the turnaround phase. Yes.
So I have a lot of questions about special ed. I'm just going to
Okay.
on the front end, and then I'll stop apologizing. 25%, is there any indication as to what that's about? Is that an issue of over-identification? Is it certain disabilities that are clustered in that geographic area?
It is, I think it's more of an indication of parents of special ed students are better at advocating and making sure that they get students into schools ahead of time. I will tell you, our independent schools in Washington State are all in the 24-25% range, which is not similar to the district. So sometimes, and this is my experience even as a principal in Chicago, sometimes counselors and other people at schools will encourage parents to send their kids to a charter school if it's a small school in a much, more personalized learning environment. So you'll have a piece of that. I wouldn't necessarily know if it's over-identification. I think we're doing our best at our middle schools. Again, we have these students for a year or two to move them out of special ed if they're showing the growth and the gains that they need. But I think a lot of this really has to do with when you looked at our school, especially year one, we didn't have a building to show with people. We just sort of were aiming in the vicinity of look to the left. It looks like a church right now. So some students who are maybe athletes or interested in other things are not going to be as likely to apply for a charter in the first year until they see a facility. So there were a number of students who chose Kirby or Wooddale that were our students because they wanted to play sports or do other things. So you tend to get a higher. I don't think this population will stay as high as we move through the years, but I think a lot of it has just had to do with a kind of the confluence of who wants to come to the school and what parents want for their kids, and maybe what we weren't able to offer first year.
In terms of the spectrum of disabilities that you have, how many kids do you have on the sort of low incidence, high needs, like the ALT assessment side?
We have 7 who would fall into that category. We have 1 gifted student who falls into that 25%, and the rest of them fall in the SLD range for the most part. And we do have a functional skills course at our school. It's always a fun but small classroom.
And as far as resources go for special ed, I'm sure you've been part of a lot of conversations around that. Has that been, can you talk a little bit about how you guys have managed? I mean, even 7 high needs kids is
It's hard, yeah. So we have, the good news is that we have a lot of special ed kids across all 30 of our schools, so we have a lot of history. At our home office level, we have a director of student services who is the director of special ed. She is over counseling programs as well, some of the school culture kinds of things if we have discipline issues. And we have what we call a SEPA, which is a special education program administrator. So those 2 people, and we contract out for school psychologists if we need occupational therapy, speech, whatever other needs. And because we have 4 other schools we're able to contract out, it's been, because we don't get special ed funding our first year. And even when we get it, if we know that this is it's a national issue, but certainly an issue in Tennessee. I think at Fairleigh we had about $1.2 million worth of needs for special ed that are not funded, and that's very common in our schools, and very unfortunate because it makes it difficult to fund it. But this is something that because we're big enough, we can share resources and make sure that we provide supports to students. So We have a great group that we work with for our psych services.
When you contract out speech or OT, how is that? Sorry.
It's,
Here, talking to mine.
I can
You
hear you,
can
but I
hear
know
me.
this is probably being recorded.
Just
so.
when you
Yeah,
contract
first
out for
reading.
these services, how is that reimbursed?
We cover it in the gap that we have to fill through philanthropy, to be honest with you. I mean, because this district is in its first year, and this happens everywhere. We work through this in California. We do not get any special ed funding for the first year. And again, most of the costs of special ed are not covered by state or federal dollars. So this is part of the fundraising. We're not nearly as good at it as KIP is, but part of the fundraising need that we have as an organization. And part of the benefit of having a network of schools is you can share costs. So it does get a little bit more manageable than it would if we were just a one school with no other reason. We'd have a lot of difficulty, I think, if we were just a mom and pop shop with one school.
Tess, were you about to jump in and talk about the prior year count for IDA funding?
I was not
Might be helpful for Gordon to know.
Yeah, so the way IDA is funded in Tennessee is that they take the prior year count of a district and use that special education count to fund IDA fund for a district for next year. So what will happen is this coming year, the district will get an allocation based on the number of special education students that were enrolled in Bluff City High School in this current year that will fund.
Yeah.
And that's the way funding happens across the state for districts. It becomes very evident in a district like ours where we are growing grade by grade. In a large district that has a pretty constant population of students, that funding isn't changing.
And
that
school by
much.
school, I mean, when
Right.
Randy comes to talk to us,
Right.
and we've got another school next year, we'll still only have IDA funding for our district based on the number of students
Freshman
served
year.
in Bluff
The
City.
good news is we have a lot of special ed students. I'm just kidding. Yeah, so this is a national I mean, we've dealt with this everywhere we've gone. So you just sort of plan in your cost of startup to make sure that you have a cushion, because that's and you honestly never know really who you're going to get. So great. Okay. Looking at math subgroup, it's a little bit the same conversation where we're showing not as strong a growth as we are in reading, and I think we're making some adjustments to our math intervention program. We're on slide 9, but we are showing the same sorts of growth. So we're feeling really positive that we are moving kids in the right direction. We know that we have a lot of work to do, and I think with math in particular, what we have found, we're using a program at the high school called Engage New York, which is sort of what everybody nationally is using. It's very Common Core aligned, not quite as well aligned at the high school. So we've had to do some more supplemental work with that, and we're working with an outside provider to make sure that we're kind of meeting the gaps in those areas. But we're feeling, again, pretty good about the growth we've seen first semester as far as academics go. And testing starts in a few weeks, so we'll find out pretty soon. Couple of issues on school culture. Average daily attendance a little lower than we want. I think the number in here that we are focusing on most has to do with our chronic absenteeism rates. This is a very big issue in Memphis in particular. This number is a little higher than we think it probably should be. There's some beginning of the year kids not showing up right away. Memphis doesn't like to show up to school till after Labor Day. I think they have been starting school since before Labor Day, since probably I would have been in school. So we have had some trouble getting them in at the beginning. We're seeing this number shrink, and the chronic absenteeism number will change quite a bit. We have what we call a student attendance review team, which is counselors, principal, and other staff who goes through a process with families to figure out how do we get you to prioritize getting to school on time. If you're a parent who's working, how are you making sure your child gets there? We have a lot of students who live very close who still take the bus. We don't have great public transportation, and we don't love to walk in Memphis, but it is a number that we're getting better at. Detention average is probably going to stay the same. I think one of the fun, interesting things of having a high school that's just a 9th grade, there's a ton of advantages of just having a 9th grade. But you don't have the just natural deterrent of an 18-year-old walking around the building deterring behavior just because you don't want to look foolish in front of them. So much of first semester, they're still sort of middle school students behaviorally. So there's always some challenges when you start a new school and bringing 2 schools together. But overall, it's been good. The suspension rate, we're happy to share, has gone significantly down. We had not had any third quarter. So we are really starting to make some progress, and a lot of the The suspension incidents were mostly sort of verbal altercation types of things. There was nothing too serious. And that's a number that we look to get below 2%. Organization-wide, if you look at all of our schools, if you're looking at number of incidents divided by number of students, I know Tennessee counts it different, we try to get below 2%, 5% for sure, and 2%. So that will continue to move in the right direction. And happy to say we've had no expulsions so far this year. One of the things Jonas, our principal, has done really well is we do some restorative practice work, but I think the thing he's the best at is community service in lieu of. So you will see at one of the first days of school, there was a child outside in his socks because he didn't want to get his shoes dirty, and he was helping rake leaves. And they can volunteer. We don't force them to do labor, but they can. One of the things that they can do is service. So they'll help a teacher. If their incident was with a teacher, we will have them spend time with that person and restore that relationship. But community service is a little old school, but it has worked very well and changed a lot of behaviors in the school.
Can you just clarify for me how you're defining the chronic absenteeism?
Chronic absenteeism is students who are absent over 10% of the school year. So at the first semester, this is what that number was, which is a lot of days to miss, and a big kind of culture shift that we have in Memphis that we're working on in all of our schools. Our other ASD schools have actually they'll win Grizzlies tickets. There's events, Seating Success, some of the groups, to get the number down, but our numbers are still way too high. So, and just a couple other things on school culture. It's hard in a building, those of you who've seen it, it is a church, still has the baptismal in it, that is the cafeteria room and one hallway right now. So it's not a great high school with an indoor-outdoor pool and a football stadium and all of that, but they have done a really good job of trying to have a number of activities that students and parents can get engaged at the school. And they've actually been pretty okay with the fact that it's a strange little building with one hallway right now. So we do, when everybody goes to College Day, they're actually doing a big tour coming up this spring. I think they're going down towards New Orleans for that one. We have theater arts, we have band. The after-school programs are starting to grow. And then there's just been a number of meetings with parents to try to get them into the building for positive events as well. And then just kind of looking at the last slide for next steps, I think, obviously we're hiring right now for our sophomore year teachers. We have, a whole nother set of people to hire, and we're continuing to sort of refine our RTI programs and our math intervention, as we talked about earlier. Science pathways will be changing in the state of Tennessee, so we're trying to make sure that we are spending all of next year sort of rewriting what the science curriculum looks like. The good news is we are using next gen standards already in the two other states we're in, so we have a lot of great material. We just have to make sure this next gen aligns with what Tennessee's doing and get the curriculum in place. We're very excited. We are applying for the 21st Century Grant, which we have at our 4 other schools, so we'll be able to fund after-school programs, more athletic options. We mostly played JV sorts of games. Our poor little Bluff City kids lost by 60 points to one of our own high schools, so I was very mad. I was not at the game. But we will actually be able to have some varsity sports. We'll be terrible again next year because they're still, especially boys, they're much smaller in the early grades. And then, again, the focus on chronic absenteeism. The next phase of the building starts any day now. We've already made all the purchases, but the groundbreaking is going to happen very shortly. And then we're very excited. It's very difficult when you have 9 teachers to have all the teacher leadership roles that we want to have in our schools because there's just not enough of them. So we'll be kind of improving all of those programs as we do at other. And then the big fundraising is to hopefully get a football field. Long way to go on that one still, but we're excited about. The kids are very excited about those types of things. So, any other questions? Yes.
These microphones are temperamental.
I actually have an outside voice, so I'm fine. You talked a lot about hiring for the next years. I'm curious how the staff and teachers and leadership, the retention so far this year.
It's good so far. I mean, we did have a physics teacher who, the hard part about physics is there's almost nobody certified to teach physics, so this is one of the pathways we're going to change. And a lot of our physics teachers are used to teaching sort of the honors type of students in senior year. So this is somebody who was recruited back to. All of our physics teachers so far this year in our other schools have been offered bonuses to go to the local school district of over $10,000, but they're staying. We are going to look at our science pathway for that. But other than that, the other teachers are doing well. We had 2 first-year teachers who, one is just doing great, another one still needs some support, and that's very, very common, I think, in schools. I remember my first year teaching and still have some nightmares about things I thought would work that didn't. But our teachers and our administrative team has all indicated that they're staying outside of this one opening that we have. And, we've already hired our math teachers, which is one of the other difficult things. It does not appear as though we're talking to a couple of teachers. Last year, we were able to get the counselor, the assistant principal, and a few of our teachers were transferred over from other Green Dot schools, which was great, just kind of understanding the mission and how things work. I do not believe there's any new ones that will be doing that this year, but I think we're fine with that. We've got a pretty good foundation there right now.
Special ed teachers do you think?
We have 2 currently, and we're waiting to see, so we expect at least 1 more. And I think that's probably all we'll need next year based on, I think, in the lottery this year, I think there were 25 more students who were offered. They have not accepted yet, so we're in the process. So the special ed number will go down likely next year. So we think 1 more teacher would be sufficient, but we have to look at the IEPs and make sure. So.
Elisa, in particular, being on the phone, I want to make sure if you've got any questions for Megan that you have a chance to ask those before we move to Randy.
Actually, a lot of my stuff was answered offline and then through the course of the conversation, so I'm good. Although I will request, Randy, before you go, can you speak as loud as possible? Thank you.
Yes.
Use your teacher voice, Randy.
And I just have one more question. And some of these, Megan, are just for the benefit of the board because we've talked extensively at our site visit. But I know last year, given the timing of the approval for Bluff City, we had a pretty short on-ramp, hiring teachers, training teachers. Can you talk about what the onboarding for your new teachers and the work you're going to be doing with your existing teachers ahead of this coming year looks like?
Yeah, that's a great question. So we are ahead in hiring. I think it was difficult even to recruit students because our principal didn't move here until the summer. So we had this, trust us, there's a building, trust us, there's a principal, and we don't have that this year. So we are actively recruiting. I've signed contracts for 2 hires, but I know there's about 7 more people in the process for hiring. And we do 3 weeks of summer professional development before school starts. 5 days will be specifically for new teachers, and then the rest of the staff will come back. We actually do, all 5 schools will have a number of days together, and then school sites will have 3 sort of, retreat days that they do just the school site. So what's been great is we are, just had a meeting on Monday with the leadership teams of all of the schools to finalize the process for applications for teacher leadership roles and all of those types of things. So we will have, we have 3 different kinds of teacher leadership roles, like department chairs, safe and civil, sort of the school culture team, and then people to support the advisory program. We will have more of those at Bluff this year, and they will actually have we'll do a teacher leadership summit, and then they will also help do professional development for the staff this summer. So they're looking very carefully at how do you maintain culture. We're also doing the same thing with students. Like, you now are the leaders of the school, even though you're, 15 years old, and what does that look like when you're welcoming new freshmen into the building? So they're actively planning out a series of activities this spring for students and for teachers as well, to kind of make sure everybody gets acclimated on board to the expectations and culture.
Can I ask one final question? I know that one population that you all didn't anticipate being so high was the EL student population. Yes. So we've talked a lot about SPED today, and I just love if you could speak to the population of those students and how you all are supporting and things you're thinking about for next year.
Yeah, so I did not put SPED numbers in here, or EL numbers in here, and I don't know why, and I will find out why. But coming from California, we are very familiar with working with English language learners, and I think that's a population we're excited to work with. So we do have an ESL, an English language learner teacher at our school as well, and we do provide additional supports to students. We think this is a population in that part of town that's going to continue to grow. And it is, being from California, people have a lot of things to say about Green Dot, but the Latino population actually thinks it's a good thing we're from California, and we've met a bunch of people we work a lot with Latino Memphis and some of the other groups. What I can say is I've looked in depth at the MAP testing data at Kirby and Wooddale for our English language learners, and they're showing tremendous growth. Our math especially is in the 99th percentile of growth on the MAP test. So math is easier than English, English language learners, but we're showing a lot of growth, and we're going to kind of continue. We have a literacy specialist who's just focused on English language learners, who provides coaching to 4 of the schools. Fairleigh has maybe 1 or 2 students who are English language learners a year, and then Hillcrest has some French speakers, but the East Side schools all have a growing population, and we have a coach who is specifically helping us, adopt curriculum and make any necessary changes. So we're showing a lot of growth at the middle schools, and I don't know why I didn't put that in here. So we can get that for you as well.
Thank you. Thank you. And I will say, from a technical perspective, Elisa has been kicked off. So just give us, while we're transitioning, I will be dialing her back in. So one moment.
Great. Thank you.
I don't know. Technology. I'm ready.
Is she back?
She's back. We have her back.
Great.
Great.
Carry on.
Great. So I'll start talking, and then we'll pause in a moment to check my volume. So I'm Randy Dowell, the founder and executive director at KIPP Nashville. Thank you for having me. I think I want to probably start with the headline. Our school is not yet open, but start with the headline. Things are progressing well, and we're in good shape. And then take you through 6 big buckets of work that we're tracking. So the first of those, and then let me say, stop me along the way if you have any questions. So I think the first big question was, how's community engagement? We're moving into a new community. So how's community engagement in South Nashville, Antioch in particular? So let me pause here. Elisa, can you hear me?
Yes, I can. Thank you.
Okay, great. So we started this work last summer. We knocked on over 3,000 doors last summer to begin to get the word out. We've held a lot of community meetings, both in a public library in the area and also at parents' homes. All of that, and we've staffed, to make sure that we're engaged in the community. We've had one full-time staff member, almost exclusively dedicated to building relationships in the community, specifically with parents. All of that's led to a few weeks ago when we had our lottery, our school lottery. We had 330 applications. 288 of those applications chose KIPP Antioch College Prep Elementary as their first choice, and that's for 140 seats. So we are going to open with 2-to-1 demand for every seat that we're opening. Of the 140 seats, we've got 140 verbal acceptances from parents. We have not yet held our first enrollment meeting, but we've spoken with every parent on the phone and gotten a verbal acceptance. So all of the seats are full. So we're feeling good about that. It's been interesting. We've been operating for the last 14 years in East Nashville and North Nashville. One thing that we've learned is this new site in South Nashville, within a 10-minute radius of where the school will open, there are 7,000 students that are within a 10-minute drive to the school site. At our other schools, we range from 2,800 school-age students to 5,000 school-age students. So there's a lot more. This is why we're opening the school. We knew there were a lot more students. We know that the public schools in the community are overcrowded. All of that has resonated, and we've heard it on the doorstep, and I think that's one of the reasons why we've seen such strong demand for the seats that we're opening. Third bucket, I'll talk about financials. Things are coming well. We're progressing well. We've raised roughly $600,000 in philanthropy and another $600,000 of federal startup funds that'll come to support the opening of this school. So we're feeling good about that. I'd say I know you all are talking authorizer fee in a little bit. That's my pinch. My push is going to be like, keep that as low as you possibly can, run the organization as lean as you possibly can. I know you guys are working hard and have been great to work with. But for every, $30,000 or $35,000 that leaves the school, that's a teacher that we're not staffing. So, let's, I think, operate, and also let's operate in I guess that's the analogy to keep in mind as you guys discuss where that fee should be. Fourth bucket, facility. We will soon sign a lease on our first year site. We're going to be in a temporary site for first year, and then we are looking at a piece of property which we will probably execute all of not only the purchase but the development work in the next couple of months for a long-term site. So things are progressing really nicely on both those fronts, and we're feeling good about kind of where we are, especially moving into the new community. Fifth bucket, staffing. So we've got 15 staff members that will be on the ground running the school. 10 of those 15 are currently hired, including the full leadership team. So we're feeling very confident, based on where we expect to be in hiring for the coming year. This school is right on track. We have 5 more hires to make. Those are teacher hires. We feel very confident that we can make 5 excellent teacher hires between now and July. So feeling good about that. Also, it's worth pointing out the leadership team here is going to be a very diverse leadership team. So 3 members, 2 African American, one white, and one of whom grew up in the community. So we're feeling pretty. It doesn't always work out that way, but feeling pretty happy about where that's landing. The sixth and final bucket, just our operational plan for, I think as we've gone into the work of opening this 3rd elementary school, one of the big pushes we've made is, hey, let's make sure all of our since we're opening kindergarten here, let's make sure all of our kindergarten classrooms at now our 3 elementary schools are running the same plays consistently. So we know that we're going to be assessing students in the same way, we're going to be using the same curriculum. That allows us to bright spot within our organization as we grow and leverage strengths. So I feel this is probably the nerdiest part, but I'm probably most excited that we're doing this, that we have, we are on track to 100% alignment from an instructional and programming perspective on what's going to happen when we open up Kip Antioch College Prep Elementary School. So I feel really good about that. We just opened up another elementary school this past fall and saw and see some great results there, and I think that we'll see even better results by having more kindergarten teachers running the same set of plays and collaborating together. So that's all I've got, y'all, except unless you have questions. Yes?
Hello. Do you, of the 140 verbal acceptances, do you have an idea of demographics, specifically
I do.
EL, special ed?
Yep, so we're looking at, we don't for EL and special ed. So we don't have that information yet. Yeah. So what we do have, kind of the race breakdown is roughly 30% Latino, 20% African American, and 30% other, which are mostly immigrant groups.
Okay. And do you not have special ed just because of child violence and it's kindergarten?
Correct. Yeah. So these are 4-year-old students who don't.
Some would have some could have an IEP.
They could. We don't ask for that in our application, so we will find that out during the enrollment process. We're expecting our EL population to be somewhere in the 50% range, and our special ed population, if it's consistent with our other schools, should be between 12 and 18%.
So I had another question, but that made me think of yet another, so I'll start with this one. But given that you haven't been in this area of Nashville, and you just mentioned it's going to be close to 50% English language learners, can you talk about some of the ways you're preparing your staff and the model to support such a large English language population?
Yep. Yeah, so we have in kindergarten, we have an associate teacher model, and we're bringing in EL certified teachers into every classroom. That's the play we're running.
And not to put words in your mouth, but in your school leader going through some kind of dual certification program
exactly,
as well?
Yes, our principal is going through an EL certification as well. So we think this is it's a shift from what we typically do. And clearly, having the principal go through that program is completely new for us. But we think that leveraging the second adult in the room to ensure that we have an EL certified teacher, you know, at least the capacity to have EL certified teachers across the board, should prepare us. You know, we also have done a lot of studying and realized that kindergarten is a great place to start with English language learners because, you know, I learned this out by asking this question. That's when every kid is learning how to read. If you don't know how to read already, like, you're learning how to read there. So it's a really great time to do that work.
Yeah, that's great. Just my other question was kind of back to the programming for kindergarten, and we were able to do kind of a quick visit at one of your other elementary schools and saw some kindergarten and first grade classrooms. So wanted to hear you just talk a little bit more in detail about sort of the model that KIPP uses for particularly early grades and, you know, what role technology plays. We saw a lot of tablet use and that kind of thing, but can you talk to us just a little bit more about the programming and the model?
Yes, I'm probably not the best to get into deeply in the weeds. We use a curriculum for math called Eureka and for reading called Wheatley. And these, we carry them all the way through, like, they end up going at least K-8, but they're Common Core aligned. And the technology components, I don't know the answer to which components are technology based. I know that they're, like, very, very text rich, like, and text heavy. And so, yeah, I probably don't have a better answer for the technology.
We could save that for another meeting potentially, but it was just something I was curious about when we popped in and saw the use of sort of tablets as part of the sort of curriculum in a pretty extensive way. I just wondered how that was woven in, but like I said, we can hold that. We're going to be hearing from you a lot more in the future. So
sounds good.
You mentioned a number raised through fundraising, I forget.
Yeah, 600,000.
How did you go about doing that?
How do we do that? I think the reality is that, you know, the question of, like, how much should we be funding education is, like, it's a healthy debate. Our answer is going to be, like, more always helps. And so we have been cultivating for over a decade relationships with local leaders and businesses that are interested in seeing bright spots in public education. And, you know, most recently, a week ago, we had a fundraiser where we were talking about this new elementary school that's going to open. At that fundraiser, you know, we raised over $300,000 for this work. So I think through corporate partnerships and through events like that.
So it's not grants and it's more private.
So this is, the philanthropy is all private. Yep. And I think to kind of close, like, what compels people, I don't know the answer across the board, but I can say, like, what I've seen compel people is when, for example, last week we had this annual fundraiser that we run year over year. It was produced and run almost exclusively by our high school seniors who were going to schools like, I think 17 of them have been accepted to University of Tennessee at Knoxville, 6 at Fisk University, 6 at Lipscomb, 5 at Belmont. What else? As far away as Xavier in Louisiana, Duke University on a full scholarship, Vanderbilt, Howard, 2 at Spelman. So seeing our students living in communities where, you know, college accessibility is elusive. I mean, by any number, by any stretch, it's elusive. And then seeing that we at KIPP Nashville are actually having a lot of success getting kids to and through college. I think that has helped draw people who are compelled to support the mission into the giving space.
Randy, when did you first open your first school in Nashville?
2005, July 18, 2005.
I think that's part of it too. He's been at this work for a while and has established a track record across the schools that you opened.
Yep.
So I just want for the board two quick previews. One is we are bringing a charter agreement amendment for this KIPP elementary school. So the agreement that was approved by the board when we started K-1. And based on their planning for the school, they're going to be now beginning with kindergarten.
So in April, you are going to see an amendment that's going to be brought to the board to amend it to just start with kindergarten and then continue to build up for those grades.
That's right.
And then secondly, I just wanted to talk a little bit about how the allocation projections work, especially for a new school like this one and also a growing school like Bluff City. So what we do on our staff end, we work very closely with the Department of Education as they're pulling together initial estimates. So as both KIPP and Bluff City are running their lotteries and getting acceptance, we get monthly updates of what does your total enrollment look like, what does your EL and your SPED count look like, so that we can be receiving accurate allocations from the Department of Education and then giving as close to accurate of allocations as we can to our schools, knowing that ultimately funding is going to change depending on who actually gets into the school on day one. But it's important for our work and of course their work to be as close to an accurate projection as we absolutely can be.
So I just have one more question, and Megan, you may have a good answer to this too, but I think for our board, it might be helpful to know sort of the differences between being authorized by the state board and the other authorizers that you guys have been authorized by, sort of Megan obviously being in this for much longer than Randy has, but sort of just your experience being authorized by the state board and the differences that you've seen versus a large district like Metro or the Achievement School District, and just sort of the process with the board that you've been through for the last few months to a year.
Yeah, I mean, it's important to highlight just how I think strong a partnership you all have intentionally pursued and developed. I wish I could say that we were the ones pursuing, but I feel like you all have been extremely collaborative, and I'm thinking specifically about some tools that you've developed where you've engaged us in like an iterative process, and I think that's been really nice. It's like you've really leveraged the opportunity of starting fresh and seeing us as partners in the work. That has been fresh and new, and it's been helpful. Thank you.
Don't be afraid to highlight challenges too, because again, we're a small team and it's helpful to know where we can continue to grow. So.
Yeah. So I'll give you the other maybe side of the coin is, and this is again going back to, my big push. Tess and I were talking about this yesterday. Like, the authorizer fee is the thing that I'm going to be like asking you all to wrestle with. But are there things that you're doing that are like built out that would be smart practices for a district of 100 that are in place now with a district of 1 and soon to be 2 that we could just wait on? So I'm thinking about like, I know there's the SharePoint site, which is going to be great. What would be the cost and benefit of delaying that 5 years or 10 years? Having it in place now is nice, no question. And also that's something that our district doesn't have in place with 30 or so schools. So I know that there are ways, kind of less robust ways, and I don't have a lot of specifics there, but I think I think that there might be opportunity to cost save while the district is small, and at the same time, I like the way you all are thinking about making sure that it's scalable.
Mm-hmm.
So.
And this will be an ongoing conversation, certainly on the authorizer fee. We're going to talk more about the department's proposed language for the rule. But I think, one of the things that we have said from the beginning is that we're going to be, and the language in the new law for all authorizers will require like extreme transparency. So I think one of the things you all can help us reflect on is, are there services that we're paying for that you don't need? I mean, SharePoint is one example. I will say the vast majority of our costs, though, are going towards personnel.
Right.
And that's where, again, with a really small sort of shoestring of a team, having contractors, we're trying to do it as efficiently as possible, but I think it's something that we'll want to reflect on together with you all, particularly after the first year and after the second year, just to kind of reassess, are these services being targeted in the way that's most effective?
I think and I appreciate that, because I think the state board is going to set the precedent on how that mean, I'll just give you here's an anecdote from, a year after the state board's authorizer fee was built into law. As we all know, all the districts received an authorizer fee, and we will begin paying that out as an operator next school year. So recently I was speaking with somebody in Metro's charter office who said, well, we figured out where to spend most of the money, and there's like $90,000 that we haven't figured out how to spend it yet. And I asked, would you please return that to the schools? And the answer I got was, I don't know, I think the people in our technology department could use that. So to be clear and to put that out there and to push the transparency, if you find a way to return any of the funds, I think that would set a very important precedent and also send a clear message that, this is not Brewster's Millions, which again, it's not in any stretch
Hardly.
Brewster's
It's not in
Millions.
our-
It's not even Brewster's
our case,
well,
but
it's
yeah.
not Brewster's hundreds of thousands, but one day it will
Yeah.
be.
Yeah.
One day it will be millions of dollars. Maybe, potentially, and it certainly is in the larger districts today. And so whatever you all do, I think does, because you were the first authorizer fee in the state, well, outside of the ASD, right? I think you do set the precedent for how those funds are used.
And I appreciate that comment. I think you're right. And again, another reason why we take it that seriously in terms of how we are being transparent and utilizing the funds for core purposes. But also, you should feel free to stay for the next conversation on the authorizer
sit
fee
around.
language, which is still very much in draft form.
Cool, thank you. Any
Other
other
questions?
questions?
Elisa on the phone. I know we've been having some issues, but I think she's back with us.
No, I'm good. We can move on to the next thing.
Cool.
Great.
All right, thank you.
Thanks, Randy. All right, Tess, you're going to
Great.
cover our next topic, right, on our authorizer fee.
Okay, and Elise, I'm going to talk really close to the mic just for you. So today we wanted to take the opportunity to present a draft of the authorizer fee rule that the board is going to see on first reading in April. The genesis of this rule is that the High Quality Charter Schools Act that was passed last year authorized local boards of education. So to be clear, we're not speaking here about the state board's authorizer fee that's located in a separate section. This rule would currently written, would govern local boards of education's collecting of an authorizer fee. It allowed them to collect an authorizer fee and then directed the state board to write rules around what that process would look like and what are some approved uses of that authorizer fee. So I'm going to be presenting it today and leading this discussion. The director of school choice for the Department of Education had a conflict, Marcy Tidwell, so she's not here. So we're going to be taking copious notes to be able to provide back to the department prior to bringing this to you all in April in first reading.
Just to be clear, this is being proposed by the department. This is not one, in some cases we're bringing you the draft language, but this is coming from the department.
So I want to talk briefly about the key components of this draft that you have in front of you. For the members who may be streaming this online, it's located on our website as well. A number of these things are already identified within statute, so the rule is just going to repeat it. On the next slide, we will dig into the areas where we really need feedback from you as members. So the key components of this draft rule would be that the fee that's collected by a local board of education is going to be, for each school, it's going to be the lesser of 3% of the annual state and local allocations, or $35,000 per school. The fee will be recorded in the general ledger using an appropriate revenue code as determined by the Tennessee Comptroller. The LEA shall use the annual authorizer fee exclusively for fulfilling authorizing obligations. Each LEA that collects an authorizer fee is required to report the usage of the authorizer fee to the Department of Education annually, and that report will be posted on the website. And then finally, if there are unused funds, the LEA shall redistribute those funds to its charter schools. So if you look at section 5 of the draft rule, it proposes authorized uses of an authorizer fee. And so those big categories that are currently written into the rule include the charter school application approval process, interim review process, charter school renewal process, monitoring and oversight activities, personnel costs, annual reporting, and charter school support services. So I wanted to open it up now for a discussion for the members, just kind of questions that you all might have or specific things that you would want us to take back to the department to flesh out or change prior to bringing this forward in April. Wendy. Hi.
So yes, I have a couple. Am I? I don't know. Okay, let me try.
Now it works. See, it is. Okay. So a couple things. First of all, based on what Randy was just saying, the anecdote that he reported to us, is there a way, two things that, I don't know if they help or not, but one is some language that emphasizes the importance of, frugality. I don't know, like using the funds in a way that recognizes that these are funds that would otherwise be in a classroom. I don't know if there's some language we could do there, like the shaming language. And then is there a way, if an LEA is going to use these funds for expenditures they have not used charter office funds for in the past, is there some, I don't know, approval I hate to put more bureaucracy in, but what I don't want to see is an LEA saying, oh, look, we've got another extra $600,000. Let's get a new consultant in when they don't need them. And if there's a way to have some sort of process, if it's a new expenditure or new type of expenditure, that there has to be some proof of the need for it, I would love to see that. And then the other thing that I was curious about is on the reporting. Is there going to be some sort of form for them to report on? I think Section 7 says that they'll just report the total amount collected and the obligations fulfilled. I could see that not being done well.
I think the intention, based on what conversations I have had with the department, is that there would be a standard form by which that would be reported out. And I think also what will be important is that, a lot of these, you can envision a lot of these uses being rolled up into one accounting line.
Yes.
And so I think it's going to be important. And I think to Sarah's point, as we are reporting out on our authorizer fee usage in the fall, it's going to be important for us not to say third-party services, but what exactly. Right. I don't think we need to get down to the penny, but I think explaining what those third-party services were is going to be important for the transparency of it.
Right. And I know in districts where you have, a lot of charter schools, it may be harder to do, but if there is some way in that form that links the money to which schools are, the vision here is that this money is being used to benefit these students in these schools, right? So like if KIP is giving $35,000 per school and say they had 10, because I'm bad at math, $350,000, that they would be able to look at that form and know where their $350,000 helped support their students theoretically, right? So if there's a way for that form to be just specific enough that you could look at it and see more detail than just what you were saying. We spent $1.2 million on salary. We spent $0.5 million on authorizing, that's my worry.
Okay.
So those are a couple of things I thought about.
Where did the 35,000, how was that number determined initially?
That was determined by the General Assembly.
So,
I can tell you there were years of discussions about the amounts, and it was see some of the bodies in the room who were part of those conversations.
okay, all right.
Still plenty of people who have strong feelings.
Sorry, I didn't hear the answer to the question. Was the question answered, or can I jump in with?
Well, it was a non-answer. There wasn't a great answer in terms of, there were a lot of conversations about that for years in terms of where to set the cap, and I don't know either exactly how that was determined by the General Assembly, but it was certainly
Okay.
put into code, and now
Yeah.
that's sort of what it is.
Yeah.
But yeah, go ahead, Elisa.
Got it. So one overarching thought is that I assume between now and April, before this gets before the full board, that we'll have deep stakeholder engagement, the Randys and the Megans and whatnot of the world. I mean, they're going to have a lot to say. Obviously, it's a lot of money. I think if it is supporting, to Wendy's point, though, the ongoing education of our kids, great. But there's also, I think, a lot of space for this to go sideways. And so, you know, even a well-meaning rule, not perfectly sort of written out and stated, is I think, going to be a problem down the road. So I would just advocate strongly that there be good stakeholder engagement. In terms of my own comments under 5A, my understanding, Tess, was that the Tennessee Quality Authorizing Standards were the ones that you really relied on. If not, then I think it's fine to refer to NACSA, but that did stand out to me. And I was wondering why we would use that one versus the other. So that's one comment. And by the way, I don't need answers to all of this right now. I'm just going to spew it all out. The 5E, I mean, to Wendy's sort of proof of need point, it's funny because I was thinking along the same lines, except the challenge might be how do you adjudicate all of that? Because, like, who do you go to? You know, so let's say, you know, an LEA says, okay, now we want to add 3 staff that, frankly, we never needed before, and that would not be directly in school supporting students. It's just like more oversight or more overhead or whatnot. Like, that's the worst nightmare. And so, but then even if there is some process by which, you know, you determine whether or not additional staff or like major spending should occur at the level of the LEA, it seems to me that then there's the problem of adjudication. Because if it's just the LEA saying, okay, now we have a checklist, we're going to say yes or no, and that doesn't work either. So someone more clever than me is going to have to figure this out. I mean, I'm sort of loath to have, again, like lots of process in there, but I think there is a real risk of that happening. And so anyway, I am with Wendy in terms of just making sure that the expenses are reasonable and aligned with the Tennessee authorizing quality requirements, et cetera. And so let's see, going back to 4, wait, where am I? Section 5D. I am assuming, but just to make crystal clear in the language, that this would cover, like what we mean by this is that it would cover all fees, for example, software that's required from a charter school in order to integrate with a given district. And I call it out only because I could imagine a world in which they get nickel and dimed later for that, which would be not helpful. And so I'm assuming that when we talk about, okay, if we want everything to be integrated, awesome. I am all for that. There are probably expenses associated with that, and that this section here is supposed to cover that, whether it's, I don't know what software everyone uses, whether it's Power School or whatever. And so that's just one example of just software integration, but I assume all integrations. Like if there are requirements put upon, yes, the charter school that, you know, this is all encompassing. They're not going to get nickel and dime later. Let's see. And it's very distinctly separate from other district funds. I think that's all I have, though, for now.
One key question that I think that would be helpful to give some guidance to the department on is around, right now, the way this is worded is that 5 is an exhaustive list. So it says that can be used in fulfilling the following authorizing obligations. And to Wendy's point, currently, if it doesn't fall into any of these categories, they can't spend it there. So I think the question, and I don't know the answer to it. I think internally we were talking about it this morning of, you know, especially with the institution of an authorizer fee for the first time, I can imagine that there are some legitimate costs that we haven't thought about yet, or maybe aren't on this list. And so I think one thing that may be good feedback is just, do you all have a sense of, would you want to see an exhaustive list or an ability for a district to say, here's a legitimate cost and here's why?
So my thought on that is it would depend on who gets to make that decision. I mean, if it's, and any other cost associated with
Right.
authorizing, then no, because
Okay.
then they'll, I know how that goes. So an exhaustive, but I mean, I could fit almost anything under these categories too. I know this is exhaustive, but you
Right.
could easily, I mean, because reasonable costs associated with recruiting, I mean, you could find a way to fit any cost you want here. And so I go back to what Elisa and I were both talking about, like, where's the approval of things that haven't been done before, or if there's a concern? I mean, I know that the statute gave us the rulemaking authority, right? Can we, does the rulemaking authority include us being the arbiter of that, or are you, Tess?
I think I saw our trustee general counsel walk in too.
See, Elizabeth, hello. I mean,
I think that we would have to have a conversation between us and the department of what does that look like, and certainly,
Right.
We don't want to be creating bureaucracy for bureaucracy's sake, but
Right.
certainly we want to make sure that these are legitimate uses to the fund. So I think that if that's something that this subcommittee wants the department and the state board to explore, we're happy to do that.
I mean, I'm open to any other suggestion. What I think is, what my biggest concern here is that this money be limited to the least amount needed to do what needs to be done to be a quality authorizer, and that the authorizers have some sort of oversight so that they're not creating costs to spend money that was given to them by these schools as part of the fee. So whatever that looks like, if it's, as long as it's student focused and the money that isn't needed to be spent isn't spent, and the money goes back to kids, I'm good with it. I'll be on that committee.
We'll recruit you, no problem.
Thank you.
Okay, any final comments on questions on this before we shift gears?
Just a
None
note,
for me.
Tess. Oh, sorry. I was just going to say, I think given the gravity of this rule and the need for additional stakeholder engagement and input, why don't we plan to circle back with the committee before the April meeting to let them know, what additional feedback we've gotten and what we're hearing and what kind of things they might see reflected in that
Okay,
draft
we can
rule
definitely do that.
ahead of the meeting.
Great. Okay. So we're going to move on to the final agenda item, which is just basically an authorization update from the staff of the work that we are doing to work with our two schools who you've heard about, and also some planning for next year. So we're going to talk just kind of briefly what we have done over the last 9 months of being a district and planning and preparations for 2019. And I know Angie and Jay, if you guys want to come down, because y'all have slides too. So as we've talked about, and we've talked about with you all, but we have really been living the life of being a school district. We have 150 students in one grade in one school that, to a certain extent are counting on us to be a fabulous district that has, that's fulfilling our responsibility. So we are currently doing that with 3 full-time staff members and 2 contract roles to fulfill all of those responsibilities. So what that looks like is that the BEP and federal funds flow from the Department of Education to the state board, and we send those out to the schools. So there is a financial accounting component to our work. We are responsible for the oversight and monitoring of federal programs, so making sure that federal dollars are spent in accordance with regulations and that there is appropriate implementation of federal programs. Similarly, special populations. So we have a contractor who oversees our special populations to ensure that the schools and are serving students appropriately. We have implementation and oversight of our student information system. So this is critical to getting correct funding and correct enrollment figures to the Department of Education is by adopting PowerSchool, which is one of the ways that we have used our authorizer fee money is adopting PowerSchool. And I will say it has made our lives, and hopefully the school lives, much easier, especially when it comes to the funding department. And then also the assessment coordination. So this year, online assessments are directly tied to your student information system. So if you have good data in your student information system, it will make online testing much easier. And we are in a very good spot. But we are responsible for assessment coordination. So we have attended all of the required trainings. We've trained our building testing coordinators. So we are supporting our school in that way as well. And then, just like districts are required to do a lot of reporting to the Department of Education, we are too. So everything from consolidated planning and monitoring to special populations reports to transportation reports to you name it, we've probably submitted a report on it. But that then requires our schools to provide a lot of reports to us so that we can be aligned. And we've also begun our pre-opening process with our KIPP elementary school. So that's looking like monthly meetings with their team, beginning the background check process for their staff, being in really close communication on enrollment figures so that we can be helping them to plan appropriately.
Okay. So on March 1st, we took our entire team down to Memphis and did our annual site visit with Bluff City. We've been down multiple times this year, but in State Board Policy 6.500, we have to do an official annual site visit. So we went down to do that. We combined that with our federal program's annual on-site visit. So what we did in the fall was spend a lot of time developing our site visit protocol, all the document collection that we would do with Green Dot ahead of time, and we reviewed that documentation. And then we went down and spent a full day in the school. And a lot of some of the things you heard from Megan this morning are things that we talked about we did principal interviews, parent interviews, student, teacher, special ed coordinators, EL coordinators, board members, and discussed a lot of the internal assessment trends, school culture, enrollment, plans for next year, a lot of the things that they're seeing, and just had a lot of face-to-face time with those stakeholders and able to just kind of have time to ask questions and talk to them about their experiences, particularly the parent and student experiences within the school. We also had a lot of time to observe classes. So throughout the day, while some interviews were going on, we had other staff members go in and observe classes. We got into a majority of the classes and different sections of the same courses that went on throughout the year. And what we're doing as a team is compiling all of our notes and observations, and we will provide a written feedback report to Green Dot post the site visit. It's not to be evaluative or it's just really to give them some feedback on what we saw, and then this information that we gathered will help inform the performance framework and the evaluation that we do at the end of the year as some of the qualitative data of actually being in the school and seeing what's going on.
Just a side note, I mean, I've spent other days, like full days at a given school, when I was not teaching, but it really is instructive to be there from the first bell to the end of the day and to have all the different meetings and interviews that we had. I mean, I think it was I felt like a good use of all of our staff time and really gave us a much deeper picture of what's happening in the school. So I'll look forward to those in the future for this and other schools.
Okay, so I'm going to talk really quickly about our LEA policies. We recently completed our first school policy review with Bluff City. So what that consisted of was we gave them basically a list of all of the required policies and procedures that they needed to have. They then submitted those to us. We, meaning I, went through and reviewed all of them and provided them basically a list of all of the corrections, areas that needed to be fixed, and then they provided a plan for how they were going to fix those, and then are currently in the process of making those revisions. I know some of the items were recently approved at their board meeting that they just had in March, so they are making progress on those. And we are also in the process of reviewing our state board LEA policies. These are actually going to be on first and final reading in April. I know maybe the printouts that you have say first and then final in July, but after some internal discussion on this, because our board only meets quarterly, it will be a challenge for us, and I think a challenge for our schools to have that policy process drawn out over that long period of time. So we think that this is hopefully going to be a good way for us to be able to make changes more quickly, and so that our schools can start acting on those changes, because we make changes and then they have to make changes. I will say that we are bringing quite a few revisions to our policies, and this is mostly because we've been doing this now for 6 months, and we have an idea, a much better idea now of what works, what isn't working. The school policy review was actually a really good collaborative process where we were able to get some really good feedback from Green Dot in terms of where they would like some additional detail. Our initial take at things when we developed these policies was, first of all, we have to get these done and on the books. But second of all, we wanted to definitely keep in mind the operators with charter schools having the ability to have as much autonomy as possible. We've since found out that there are areas where they would like more guidance. So we are trying to build that in. We're actually getting rid of some policies or proposing to get rid of a few. So hopefully that will be a really good set of changes that we will bring, and not have to bring as many, but I will say that, you know, a lot of these are also changes from updates to state board policies, updates to law, and, you know, local boards are dealing with this constantly. So I will not say that there will not be any more changes. There will probably be changes at every board meeting, but hopefully not as many as you will see at this next one. And then finally, we are looking forward to next year in terms of strategic planning of our policy process as a whole. So we solicited some very specific feedback from both Green Dot and KIP in terms of what does their policy process look like to help us plan for next year. We got some good feedback from Green Dot in terms of what they liked about the policy review, what was helpful, what would be more helpful in the future. So we are refining that and working on that for next year.
Great. So I wanted to mention that we as a district have developed our emergency operations plan. And I just think it's important given the incidents of late and also our statutory charge that each district has to develop an emergency operations plan. And so we have done that. We have worked with our school, Bluff City, to develop their own emergency operations plan. And then we'll be moving forward. We'll be doing that with KIP as well. It was a really informative process, even from a standpoint of how do districts approach these plans and everything they have to take into consideration. And then as a part of our monthly reporting calendar, Bluff City is required to submit drill logs. So as you may be aware, within statute, there are very specific requirements around safety drills that schools have to be completing. And so from our monitoring perspective, to make sure it's happening, they're required to submit their drill log to show that they are having these required drills.
So, as you'll remember, you all passed the performance framework on final reading in January. So the next step in that process is developing our annual report. So we're in the very early stages of developing that template. But so at the end of this school year, we will run Bluff City's assessment data and state data through that performance framework, and then coupled with some of this qualitative data that we got from the site visit, we'll produce an annual report later this fall. And the timelines of that are sort of dependent on when we get state data, but what the report will include is some basic district and school information, and then that evaluation data based on the performance framework and the annual site visit information that we gathered, as well as the usage of the authorizer fee.
So before we jump into planning for next year, I thought it would be great to take an opportunity just to reflect a little bit on our work thus far. I think the thing that I love most about our team is that we are constantly thinking about, okay, how'd that go? What can we do better next time? And it's a constant conversation because, you know, we are brand new in this work and we are learning as we are going. And as I like to say, we got to get on the bike. And once you're on the bike, you can figure out what you want to refine. And so I thought it would be great just to share with you all some of the high-level reflections that we've had this year and is really priming our thinking for next year. So first of all, relationships and trust are absolutely key to this work. We need strong relationships with both schools, the staff, that they know that when they email us that we're going to get back to them with an answer. And if we don't know, we're going to find the answer. It's incredibly important for us to be a resource and rather than an impediment to the schools. And I think the same can be said for our partnerships with the divisions within the Department of Education. they have been incredibly helpful in getting us up and running. And you know, I often like to say I do my best work when I'm on the 9th through 12th floors of Andrew Johnson, because you're able to say, hey, this is a problem I'm dealing with. How can you help? What are other districts facing? And being able to have those close relationships with members of the Department of Education are really key to our work as well. And I think that one thing that as we're thinking about, and one thing we'll talk about a little bit, is we're recruiting some additional contract roles for next year because we need such specialized support, is really having them understand that customer service is important to us. It is important that we respond to our schools in a timely fashion and that we're giving correct, accurate information. And that is really like the guidepost of how we do our work, is really making sure that we're always of service to the schools and the students in those schools. I think we've just doubled down on the importance of those specialized areas. We have a phenomenal federal programs contractor who has great experience in this work, and that is a very complicated area that we have to have true expertise. And so I think the past 9 months have just reaffirmed our true belief that we have to have someone very focused in that area. The same can be said for special populations. We have a fabulous contractor right now. She will be rolling off with us because she's going on to bigger and better things. So we're looking for another contractor to fill that role. But again, making sure that we have real key expertise in those 2 areas has been a real success for us. And then other things that Angie and Jay work on, I think, as Angie spoke to, strategic planning for the policy review cycle, really making sure that we're doing it at the right time for our schools is a key to our work. You know, improving collection of reporting calendar items. So on a monthly basis, schools have to submit different requirements on a monthly reporting calendar. You know, we take a look at each requirement and say, do we absolutely need this? Do we know why? And really streamlining that process for our schools is going to be important. Data and verification processes are critical. Jay is our data guru, and I think we have learned a lot about making sure that our data is right, and if we have an issue, how do we troubleshoot that issue? And then finally, I think this is just continuing to inform our own appeal work coming up this fall. I think that we have really honed in on, or have a better sense of, what capacity to execute really looks like. And I think that it will just allow us to be better reviewers, better interviewers, really being able to say, is this group really ready to take the application and turn it into an actual school? So let's talk a little bit about planning for next year. As we've talked already, we're in the pre-opening process with KIPP Nashville. We are working with Bluff City as they're growing to serve 9th and 10th grades. We have yet to get a budget estimate from the Department of Education. We're expecting that very soon, but we're going to get both BEP for projected enrollment and also our federal funds. So we're looking to potentially receive Title I, Title II, potentially Title III, and then also an IDEA allocation as well. The LEA planning process, so this is a requirement of all districts. We are required to put together an LEA plan with stakeholders from our schools and our staff. So that has been submitted, and soon we're going to have to submit our consolidated funding application, which is basically how we will spend our federal funds this year. In our own internal budget, we've been doing some estimates, and we'll get our official allocation from the Department of Education in April. Based on that initial budgeting, we do plan to take the 4% authorizer fee that is allowed in statute. Next year, that will go down to 3% and will remain up to 3% for the duration. This year, that has looked about $55,000. So we have spent that authorizer fee on our 2 contractor roles, the translation of a lot of our policies and procedures, and then our student information system. I think next year, similarly, we are going to be spending that authorizer fee on continuing our student information system, the translation of policies and procedures. Currently, we have them translated into Spanish. I think depending on the population that our KIPP Nashville school enrolls, we may need to expand those. And we will have a part-time contractor on federal programs, special populations, and I think we are also looking to bring someone in on data and assessments. Data takes up a significant amount of Jay's time, and it is such a critical role that us having some additional part-time support in that area, I think will be really help to the team. Travel. You know, the great thing about our KIPP Nashville schools is it's going to be here, but for Memphis, you know, somebody on the team is down on average to Memphis about once a month, so we have to budget for travel. And then we've also worked out an agreement with the Department of Education that they provide us some specialized support on finance and federal programs areas. Again, we are a small team, so we constantly are thinking, are there ways for us to leverage very small contracts to get what we need so that we're not having to hire an additional person just to fill that role? So we'll be looking to use that as well. And with that, I'll take any questions. Or Sarah, I don't know if you have additional reflections you wanted to share.
No, I mean, I think you covered a lot of it. We're learning a lot. I would say the only thing I might add is I think we're still trying to gauge, and it's so helpful to have a subcommittee where we can go into some of the weeds. And, you know, again, a lot of this would probably glaze over most of our board members. But even here, I think you all need to give us feedback about what's too hot, what's too cold in terms of how much information we're providing you, because we are in the weeds.
Yeah.
But you need to be in the weeds when you're overseeing schools. So. No, I think you covered it. We're trying to do as much as we can with as little as possible without shortchanging our schools, the services, and the oversight that we need to be providing.
I appreciate this information. Again, I'm just absorbing a lot of this side, but I think just pausing to reflect on what has been accomplished is important. You know, it's become the half of those subcommittee members, the appreciation for the hard work that you all are doing. I was just thinking, though, when you were looking at the policies and other things, when you ride the bicycle, you know, other people are riding just bicycles too. Are there resources out there that you all use to identify best practices and like that to where it's not so cumbersome?
Mm-hmm. Yes, we are not, we beg, borrow, and steal, 100%. I think, first of all, especially on the policy front, is that we are members of, we're policy subscription members of TSBA. And so the great thing about that is that they have a whole suite of model policies that we're able to say, can you provide us the model policy on X so we don't have to recreate the wheel? That has been key to our work, and I would say, Angie, yeah. Amen to that. I think, you know, the challenge is we're unique. And so we talk a lot with other authorizers. We talk a lot with other districts. We are, and we talk a lot with the folks at the Achievement School District to say, okay, how did you do this? Should we do it this way? So I think we very much are learning from others' experiences to really set ourselves up right kind of ahead on the front end.
NACSA, I think, has just been another
Yes.
incredible resource. That's the National Association for School
Charter School Authorizers, yes.
But even in sort of our drafting of the quality standards for Tennessee, they've been really instructive in helping facilitate some of our working groups. So we definitely draw from them a lot as well. But Tessa's right. We have no shame in looking for resources and help wherever we can find it.
People may avoid me when they see me walking down the hall. So like, what's Tess going to ask us for now? But I mean, I think that that's so critical with a team that's wearing multiple hats, is to really make sure that we have defined roles and responsibilities, and also that we know when we're in deep water and that we need help. And that's where that relationship piece has been key to it as well.
Elisa, unless we've lost you, do you have any last questions for the team or other thoughts? Because I think we're getting towards the end of the agenda.
Very efficiently done. Good work, everyone. So I only have one before we officially adjourn, which is around next steps. When are we convening again? Even if it's just, we'll take it offline to email to figure it out.
Yeah, I think that what would be helpful is probably once we have EOC data and it's public, I think absolutely, if we haven't met before, I think bringing the group together to really analyze the data before we bring it to the full board would be helpful. And also, you know, every year we're planning for charter school appeals, and so we'll need to think about what does the meeting timing look like, especially knowing that likely you all will be engaged on charter school appeals. Likely the timing for that will be late August. Just so that you all know, 30 letters of intent were submitted across the state to Metro Nashville, Robertson County, and Shelby County. April 1st is the deadline for application. So our thoughts and processing really starts post April 1st to see how many applications were actually received. So more to come on that area as well.
Great. Well, then we will defer to you based on, and I love the focus on the data. I can't wait for that topic. So when that comes out, plus the appeals, yeah, we'll rely on you to propose something. Other than that, I will only say, Tess, Jay, Angie, Sarah, thank you so much. I know there's an enormous amount of work that goes into preparing for these things, and it's highly beneficial to us as board members. And I'm sure to the public, in terms, whoever's out there listening, to learn about all of these issues and to get into the weeds, because I do think that we're at that stage where that's beneficial. And so thank you so much for doing all the prep. I'm not there. I'm Megan. Randy, I don't know if you're still there, but if you are, thank you so much for coming and presenting. I know there's a fair amount of work as well that went into showing up and having your words and decks ready to go. So thank you. And then Wendy and Gordon, I so miserably failed to even say hello to you at the beginning, but that is no indication.
But you were a voice
love.
from above, so it was all right.
My own fellow board members, I gave you no love, but I love you. So thank you for making the time to spend with all of us to talk to charter school. So I think that's it. I think we're 20 minutes early. Well done, team.
Before we adjourn, I don't know if the committee wants to be a part of it. I would love to be a part of any conversations or some of the around oversight on the rule.
Yeah.
I don't know whatever that looks like. I just want to be a part of that.
Okay. Happy to pass that along. Thank you.
Thanks, Wendy.
Thank you.
All right. Then we're adjourned.
Fantastic. Thanks, Elisa. Sorry for our technological challenges. You hung with us, though. We appreciate it.
No, thank you for hooking it all up. Okay, bye, y'all.
Bye.